website sent me a new book titled The Mystery of 2012. I'd highly recommend it. I found stuff in the very first pages of it, and I think you'd really enjoy it. Basically, it's predictions, prophecies, and possibilities, but it gives you a real good background from various perspectives on 2012. It includes work by Greg Braden, Peter Russell, Daniel Pinchbeck, Joanna Macy, John Jenkins, and others. But as I began to read the book, and I've only completed a few pages, I found something that made me feel very good about the work we've done here so far, because I believe it connects to the work that we've put together on the Emerald Tablets. On page 1 of the book, a part written by Greg Braden, it says this, and Catherine, if you come over, we'll see it. It says, The Mystery of 2012, page 1, why did an advanced civilization suddenly appear over 1,500 years ago with the most sophisticated galactic clock known until modern times, then build a massive civilization on expansive galactic cycles, and then disappear? What sets the Mayan civilization apart from other cultures during the same period is that the Mayans appear to have arrived with an advanced technology already in place, rather than evolving their technology over a long period of time as we would expect. Although there are many theories, no one has solved definitively what it is called the Mayan riddle. We have. I don't know how to tell them, but we have. So I am happy to say that contrary to this very good book, we've definitely solved the Mayan riddle. The reasons that the Mayans appeared to have arrived with advanced technology already in place is because it was brought to South America in prehistoric times from prehistoric Egypt by a contingent expeditionary force of the Emerald UFO force. And for some reason, I know this as a fact. Let me show you another comment from the book. Okay. We'll go here. Today, when you ask the Mayan descendants what happened to their ancestors, they will tell you the story of a generation of timekeepers who one day left their temples, observatories, and pyramids, walked into the jungle, and simply vanished, returning to the place where they had come from. Regardless of what their story means, what is clear is that whoever those original Maya were, they knew something in their time that we are just beginning to understand in ours. Let's look at that line in the next one. It says, they just walked into the jungle and vanished, returning to the place from where they had come. This way? Yes. I mean, what did they say? In other words, the Mayans didn't develop these technologies and these pyramids and all of this stuff. I mean, these people were, all they could do was make pots and beads. That's all they did. But it was the race that came, the culture that came from the sky so many thousands of years before, which made it appear to those who look now as if all of a sudden, when the Mayans came, there all this stuff was. The Mayan culture had nothing to do with that amazing cycle calendar. The Mayan culture had nothing to do with the prediction of December 21st, 2012. That came from the Emerald UFO force. And the Emerald UFO fleet had landed in prehistoric Egypt and then expeditionary forces went out to different parts of the world. One of them being in South America, where then, all of this advanced technology and, pyramids and all this stuff developed, with people saying, how could such a primitive people do all this stuff? Well, they can't. If we go back to the preface on the Crystal Link site concerning the Emerald UFO Force, we read the following. Some 1,300 years BC, in Egypt, the ancient Kem was in turmoil, and many delegation of priests were sent to other parts of the world. Don't confuse the word priests. Right away you think of holy people. Don't think that way. They're called priests by other people who thousands of years ago considered, these aliens to be gods and so forth. These were an expeditionary force. Among those were some of the pyramid priests who carried with them the emerald tablets. The particular group of priests bearing the tablets immigrated to South America, where they found a flourishing race, the Mayas. Among these, the priests settled and remained, and in the 10th century, the Mayas had thoroughly settled the Yucatan. The tablets were placed beneath the altar of one of the great temples of the sun god. The whole thing is unnecessary to read, except for the part that tells you that the force that landed in Kem, or prehistoric Egypt, a part of them took off and landed in South America. And that's how come these people who were Mayans suddenly were living around these pyramids, which are energy sources, and filled with all this calendar that ends on December the 2012. It was all there before they even got there. Now, what do we have from the Mayans to confirm this? How about a carving in stone made by the Mayans of the lead alien from the Emerald UFO Force, Paco Votan? Now, let's say, the force lands in Egypt, and then they set out for the expeditionary forces to go around civilizing the planet Earth, and this group singles out this guy, we'll call him Paco Votan. You take your group and you go down there, and wherever it is. It wasn't called South America then, but anyhow he goes. Well, the Mayans then heard the legends of this guy, never having met him, never having seen him, handed down stories about him, and from what they heard, they placed a carving of him in stone. And this is it. Now, if that's not a guy in a spaceship, what the heck is it? Isn't that strange? Put two and two together. The Emerald Tablet says that an expeditionary force, UFO force from Egypt, winds up in South America, and the next thing you know, after maybe 1,000 years or however long it took, the Mayans heard the legends and start constructing this as a picture of Paco Votan. What's interesting, for a little more drama, we put this picture next to the picture of John Glenn, famous American astronaut, in his training camp. Now there's Paco Votan and there's John Glenn and his. And off they go. Of course, if the guy didn't look like this is where the Mayans would predict him. He looked like that. And the guy that looked like this at that place is the one who put together the calendar and told everybody about 2012 and so forth and so on. The technology was brought to the Mayan area of South America thousands of years ago by a UFO expeditionary force, and they remained there and they established a scientific culture. When they left, the knowledge was passed down from generation to generation, and our culture then comes along and attributes the knowledge to the Mayans. You hear it all the time. Oh, have you heard about the Mayans and their temple? Oh, all this stuff they did. They did nothing. The guy over on the right and this bunch did it. We never could figure out how they just simply were able to do this stuff, just like it says in the book. How could they, they didn't work at developing anything. It was just all there. The Emerald UFO Force is why it was there. Last week, I was gathering the equipment up, and I'm glad you came. Everybody's looking around and saying, who came? Maria. And as I was putting the equipment together, Maria came up and she sat down next to me, and she said, we really should start looking at the Tetrahedron. And I said, She said, no, she said, I think there's a lot of possibilities. What part does it play in all this? What part may it play in, these UFOs and cultures around the world and so forth and so on? Well, when something like that happens, and it's happened to me all through my time of doing this work here, that people don't say those things unless something has moved them that they don't even know to say those things. So when Maria said that she thought we should take a closer look at, it might have some connection to various locations and so forth and so on, then, I went in and I started thinking about it. The first drawings, if you remember, of a symbolic nature that came from the ancients was of Thoth, who actually they figured was the leader. You got to understand, here you go way back in prehistoric Egypt, and the UFO comes down and lands. All right? These are all people, probably men and women, a whole bunch of them. They work, they come around, they're dealing with prehistoric people, and they're checking DNA, they're making DNA adjustments of prehistoric people, they start civilizing people, and then it goes on for thousands of years. They're working down here maybe 3,000, 4,000 years. And then maybe at this 4,000 year, legends start to develop about the gods who came down from the sky and told us these things, And it went on and on and on. And, so they start naming these people. And they call the commander Thoth. Well, that wasn't his name, of course. You got to call him something. And they picture him. And they picture him, the Egyptians did anyhow, in this way, holding a tetrahedron in his right hand. And you can see it here. This is the tetrahedron that Maria was talking about. Now, obviously, he didn't look like that. Because, you wouldn't want to hang around if somebody came looking like that. But this is all symbolic. The wheel, the tetrahedron, the cross, the single eye, the left hand, the scribe, the pen, which we connected him to the book of Ezekiel, and the head of the ibis. The head of the ibis is in other words, this is not a picture of a real person. This is simply symbols showing you a story. Like might show up in a crop circle or something like that. But the ibis is an important part of the story because the ibis feeds itself by taking that which is hidden. It digs into the mud, into the darkness, and gets its sustenance and life force from that. And that was what the message that was brought by these UFO people, that what would come to them, they would have to bring out from the darkness. So we connected the cross and the single eye to Jesus, and that pen in the left hand to Ezekiel, and all of this stuff. And then, of course, in the right hand, the tetrahedron. When Maria began talking about the tetrahedron, I gave her the name of a gentleman who is an amazing person. And you'll see a lot of people, well, he's self-taught, he doesn't have any degrees or anything like that. I don't either. Maybe, and Joan says, I think that's why you like him. Yeah, maybe. Because his mind wasn't already warped by some teacher telling him, this is what you have to think. He was able to find it himself. His name is Nasim Haramein, Haramein. Well, between Maria and Nasim Haramein and my meditation, all kinds of doors opened. One big door opened, and I found 30 doors down the hallway, and I thought, oh my goodness gracious. But Maria made a good point, and that is there has to be an important reason why that symbol of the tetrahedron shows up. That's the most significant thing. What in the world is he doing with that in the right hand? Well, the problem for me is when I set off trying to do this, I found that the information about the tetrahedron was flying as high as a UFO would over my head. I didn't know what the heck anybody was talking about. So anyhow, to break ground, we started in the beginning of our Emerald study with the findings and the comments on the tetrahedron some time ago by Nasim Haramein. But there was one person. He's not a physicist. He doesn't have any degrees. I always like to have credible witnesses, you know. He has a degree from Oxford. He has a degree from Princeton. This guy has no degrees, and he's the most brilliant mind. But he's like us. Because even though he's brilliant and from some way understands all this stuff without having gone to all of these schools, he connects it. I was watching him in his video, and if I can get enough people interested here, I'm going to copy that video, and we can all come around one night and watch this thing. Watch him one night he was saying, you know, I never connected all of this to the Bible because I was raised Catholic. And he said, you know, I wasn't interested in any of it, but then he started connecting it like we do here. But he's somebody that speaks in the way that you and I can understand. He doesn't declare facts, but he takes pieces of the puzzle, puts them together, tries to make sense of it. And I think basically that's what we've done the same thing. John. And this is him. Nasim Haramein was born in Geneva, Switzerland in 1962. He spent most of his life researching the fundamental geometry of hyperspace, studying a variety of fields from theoretical physics, cosmology, quantum mechanics, biology, and chemistry to anthropology and ancient civilizations. His Schwarzschild proton paper has recently received the prestigious Best Paper Award, that should be award, in the field of physics, quantum mechanics, relativity, field theory, and gravitation at the University of Liège, Belgium, during the 9th International Conference. Now, can you imagine this? This guy's never been inside of a college. And yet he goes around and lectures at colleges. I could say my same thing. I've never even been on a college campus. Fluent in both French and English, Haramein has been giving lectures and seminars on his unification theory for over 10 years. He has presented at such institutions as the Department of Physics at Georgia Tech, the Department of Physics at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, and fellows of the Department of Education at the University of Montreal. In the past 20 years, Nasim Haramein has directed research teams of physicists, electrical engineers, mathematicians, and other scientists, and he has founded a nonprofit organization, a Renaissance Project, where as the director of research, he continues exploring unification principles and their implications in our world today. Now, he's placed a video on Google, which is 4 hours long, 2 of them. And I highly recommend it. And then when you get to the video, move the bar to about the 2 hour and 24 minute mark, and I think that's where you'd want to see it. But if you do what I did initially, especially without meditation, and you look at various websites concerning tetrahedron, you're going to find yourself swimming in extreme confusion. I'm saying, what do I listen to Maria for? I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. What is this? It was totally out of sight. But my job isn't to understand all of the mathematics, but just try to connect pieces that seem relevant. You see, and these pieces can be a chain that we can pull and follow back to the source of what we refer to as God and Jesus. And the point is, does that tetrahedron in that symbol's hand mean anything to this? Well, in following Maria's suggestion, I began to study tetrahedron, and I ran into stuff like this and decided, forget it. This isn't going to work. This is what the heck is this? I didn't know. I said, nah. Yeah. So then I did what I usually do. I held my breath and went into the meditation, and I said, what's this all? I don't know what the hell is this. But as weird and as deep and as far out as some of this stuff was, I thought she was right. If the tetrahedron is in the right hand of the one from the emerald UFO, then there has to be something extremely significant and something that's not just reserved for scientists. So I went back and I looked at what Nasim did, and I pulled out the first references we looked at when we began the Emerald UFO study. And this is what he said. Nasim Haramein and Rauscher have developed a hyperdimensional theory of everything. Now, when it says everything, I mean everything. You, ants, ticks, planets, galaxies, oceans, everything, called the holofractive universe. This unified field theory is founded on a specific geometric array, which they found to be fundamental to creation. Keep that in your mind. Fundamental to creation. Basically, Nasim found out that everything boils down to a tetrahedron. Everything boils down to a tetrahedron. The tetrahedron is the most basic shape to be found in the three-dimensional universe of volume. Now, don't let that word volume, you see, we're going to say, what volume? You turn up the volume. No. What volume means in this way, when they talk about volume, they mean where there is nothing. Where there is perfection, where there is nothing. Separating from thought, there is nothing. Entering into space where there is nothing, but there is tetrahedron. Okay, the Merkaba star tetrahedron is actually two tetrahedrons interlocked to form a three-dimensional star of David, which, of course, we've seen a lot. Joe? Known in esoteric knowledge of ancient Egypt as Merkaba, Mer, light, Ka, spirit, Ba, body. Light, spirit, body. The configuration of the star tetrahedron is formed within the first 8 cells of life. I had a lot of trouble with this. I went all over. I went to Stedman's Medical Dictionary. What's the other medical dictionary? Edgar's? Tabor's. When I went through all of them, I couldn't find anything relative to that. But then I did. Anyhow, cells of life and the remains fixed at the base of the spine throughout one's life. What he is saying here is that you have a tetrahedron inside of you. You have to have. The star tetrahedron also models the energetic body of the human being. The blending of heaven and earth, male and female. The tetrahedron is ubiquitous throughout nature. That means it's all over the place because the 64 tetrahedron grid is the structure of the vacuum. What that means is if you look in space and there is absolutely nothing. There's nothing in here whatsoever, okay? That's volume or vacuum. And when you look there and you say, okay, there's nothing there, that's where the 64-grid tetrahedron exists, okay? And the initial thing you think, well, it's only a geometric pattern. So, what does that mean? But then as we go on, we start to develop what that means, okay? The Merkaba, the first 8 cells of life. Well, what jumps into my head is the Emerald UFO commander was initially known as the God of 8. And Jesus was known by that name, which has the numerical value of 888. And the fact of male and female become very important. Not only in human, what's the word I'm looking at? Procreation, but in all procreation. Male and female, yin and yang, and so forth. Now, where it says the first 8 cells, I didn't want to come here and say, well, Nasim Haramein says the first 8 cells of life, that means there's a tetrahedron inside of you. And I said, well, then I'm doing what I don't do. And no matter what I might think of this guy, I can't find it any place. So anytime I see anything anybody says, I've got to go and find another source that is not part of any belief system that will confirm that. And I had a lot of trouble, and it took me a long time to try to find out whether that statement concerning human cells as tetrahedron, because that would make the tetrahedron the essence of life. But two websites helped me to confirm it, and one is called allaroundus.com. All of that is one word. And the other is called ScienceDaily.com. Very, very reputable science website. So let's look at allaroundus.com, and on the same page we'll look at Science Daily and see what they say. All around us, the tetrahedron shape is widespread in the submicroscopic structure of not only minerals, but of living cells in humans, animals, and plants. Okay? You see, if you look inside of your body or anybody's body or any animal's body or anything, it's not just structures of...
It changed by itself.
What?
It just changed.
Oh, shouldn't be doing that, should it? No, that shouldn't be doing that at all. Okay. All right. Now, so what's it say? That the tetrahedron shape is not only in minerals, but of living cells in humans. See, everything inside of you is not just like this. That's silly. It has to follow a pattern. There's a geometric pattern it has to follow. Your DNA, has to follow a pattern. There's a geometric pattern. And if it's not like that, then it won't work. It's just like circuitry in a computer or in a radio or TV. You just can't lay stuff there. It's got to all interconnect. It's got to go in a particular way. It's the same thing, and that's what it's saying, that the tetrahedron shape is inside of you. It's inside of plants. It's a fundamental basis of life. And ScienceDaily.com said this: the pyramid shape, central to research entropy, is the tetrahedron, a three-dimensional, four-faced, triangular polyhedron that turns up in nanotechnology and biology. In other words, when you take a living thing or something that had been alive apart, you'll find tetrahedrons inside. So now we're starting to say, well, now maybe that's why that this symbol would do. Tetrahedrons are the simplest regular solids, while quasi-crystals are among the most complex and beautiful structures. Don't worry about the word process. Just tetrahedrons and crystals. It's astonishing. Now listen to it. This is where I said, we're going to get, it gets complex, and I don't want to run through it, because if we do, we're not going to gain anything from it. We're not going to know. But let's think about this. It's astonishing and totally unexpected that entropy, and I'll cover that, alone can produce this level of complexity, said Sharon Glotzer, professor, University of Michigan, chemical engineering, and principal investigation. In other words, what is being said here is that what is so astonishing is that this geometric pattern in a cell in you can suddenly and unexpectedly change and create another form without anything helping it from the outside, and without anything helping it from the inside. That's what entropy means. You see what I'm saying here? So, you got the tetrahedron, and if there is something that has to be changed, say, inside of you or inside of whatever, it does it by itself. And as it changes, bigger or smaller, whatever the change is, never loses the form that it started on. Let's see it. Okay. Now, when I saw this from Science Daily, because of their very reputable scientific thing, first of all, we've confirmed what Nasim Haramein said, and that is that inside of you is a tetrahedron. Okay? So this interested me because it showed the true nature of the tetrahedron in the right hand of Thoth. And this is where it really gets good. Now, what I've done here is I've taken the words, and either in white or green, I've put my own words in, defining for you what some of these words may mean. Because words, scientific words, we don't understand. So I looked them up and then placed them here so you could understand. So, entropy. Now, what entropy means is the tendency for all matter and energy in the universe to evolve towards a state of inert uniformity. Inert uniformity means nothing goes in, nothing goes out. In other words, if you hook up an electric wire to that bulb and connect it to the power source of electricity, wherever, then you can flip a switch and turn the light on. But what this is talking about is the light goes on, but it's not connected to anything. You see? In other words, the change. So entropy, that is evolving towards a different state of uniformity, in other words, it always stays the same form, but without any assistance, that alone can create complex crystals from simple shapes. So inside of you, inside of everything, the need for a change in crystallization, whatever it may be, done by tetrahedron, because it creates it by itself. The rest of your body has nothing to do with it. So it's not just a geometric pattern that, we can do figures on, as you saw before. It is a pattern or a figure of something that is inside of you. And as you're going to see in a minute, not only is it there, not only can it do things of itself, but it can figure things out inside of you. Science Daily, December 10th, 2009, not long ago. In a study that elevates the role of entropy. Okay? Entropy, once again, in other words, something is able to evolve on its own. Okay? In creating order, research led by the University of Michigan shows that certain pyramid shapes, tetrahedron, can spontaneously organize into complex quasi-crystals. Spontaneously means all of a sudden nothing is going on. I'm looking under my microscope. Everything's fine. And then the next time you look, this whole thing has happened. It didn't ask you whether it should do this. It does it. What goes on inside of you then happens spontaneously when it's time. Now, where it says quasi-crystals, I gave you a definition, where crystals have a simple repeating structure. Crystals have a simple repeating structure. Quasi-crystals are more complex, more detailed. Let's just let it go at that. But tetrahedrons spontaneously organize into quasi, in other words, extremely complex crystals. So now, what have we found here? See, he's holding a tetrahedron. And what's the message now? It's not just a geometric form. It's the creator. It spontaneously, without any help from anybody, does things that have to be done, and yet always retains itself in you, in plants, in minerals, and in the universe. And so we start to see the nature of this. Notice that that spontaneously, they just do it whenever they want to, whenever they need to. Let's go back and look at this again. Professor Sarah Galazzi, University of Michigan, says the significant finding is that the tetrahedrons can unexpectedly organize into intricate quasi-crystals. Unexpectedly. They just do it. In this computer experiment, many thousands of tetrahedrons organized into 12-fold quasi-crystals made of parallel stacks of rings around pentagonal dipyramids. A pentagonal dipyramid contains 5 tetrahedrons. So, and I know, your head's so, oh my God, what the hell is it? But we don't know this is going on. How many of you could sit here and say you felt the tetrahedrons changing inside of you? But they did. Because they knew something had to be changed or duplicated. Our results go to the very heart. Now listen what she says. To the very heart of how complex order arises in nature. Out of nothing. We knew that entropy, we know what that is. That's what something just happened without any... We knew that entropy on its own could produce order, but we didn't expect it to produce such intricate order, such complex order from tetrahedrons. So now you're starting to see, what's he holding in his hand? Huh? How important is that? And that tetrahedron was put in his hand by somebody drawing thousands and thousands of years ago because they heard of it passed down from legends and stories and so forth. Something that contains an intelligence doing something for a purpose inside of you, inside of the air where there is nothing, inside of everything, inside of the universe is God. The geometric pattern that's going to be formed is very important, which raises now to my head the importance of geometric patterns in the universe that we see in these pictures around here of supernovas, as well as in crop circles and crop formations. You're not looking at smoke and mirrors here. This is Science Daily, and you're looking at the University of Michigan. These are credible people. And even though he doesn't have a degree, neither do I, Nasim mine, somehow knows what he's talking about. Let's go to Science Daily again. This computer simulation, now, are you ready for this? Allowed the tetrahedrons to figure out the best packing on their own, according to the laws of statistical mechanics and thermodynamics, Michael N. University. The tetrahedrons were left alone to figure out what they wanted to do. how important then is what he was holding in his hand. And why was that message given to us 26,000 years ago and then handed down, and then not only through Egypt and Greece, and then, do you know, this is really something. I didn't get to this, but this, you know what a tetrahedron is called? You know what it connects to? You remember when I told you about the Plustians, who were also a UFO expeditionary force that left Chem and founded Greece, where all of the brains all of a sudden appeared with stuff about atoms and quantum and philosophy and all. Do you know what a tetrahedron is called? A platonic solid. You know what the word platonic is from? Plato. Where did Plato come from? Certainly. And Plato discussed tetrahedrons in his work. Platonic solid. Look it up sometime. But consider this, that the tetrahedrons were left to figure out the best way to go. So the nature of that which is within us and that which is within space and that which is within everything is an intelligence that can change patterns based on a will of its own. The next thing, when you say, thy will be done, you're talking to a tetrahedron. Nasim told us that the 64 tetrahedron is the structure that is in all space where there is nothing. What this means is empty space is not empty because it has the invisible same tetrahedron as you have inside of you. And what we know now says that the tetrahedron is capable of changing geometric patterns for the sake of order. Now this is the 64 tetrahedron that Nasim says is the structure of everything inside of us, inside of the universe. Look at it. There it is. That's the 64 tetrahedron. Each of these is a face. They call them faces. They're the forms of the 64 tetrahedron. I don't know how many of you are aware of the Bible. Well, you're aware of the Bible. Do you know how many faces is in the 64 tetrahedron? 144. Did you ever read the book of Revelation? Isn't it? See where we're getting. I'm waiting for the door to open. There's a poem by Beverly Ann Farrand, F-A-R. I found it at www.arisein.org. I just copied a couple of verses because I thought it was pretty neat. Infinities by Beverly Anna Farrand. The ancient symbols hold the key to the sacred geometry. Two pyramids within a ring can divide to create everything. Infinite fractals, I'll give you that. A fractal is something that may start out like this and wind up like that, but be the exact same. It's like, almost like in a hologram, where you break it and everything has got the same picture. Infinite fractals with infinite spin create the shape of yang and yin. David's star is a pyramid up and down with a consciousness feedback loop is found. 64 tetrahedrons form the greatest stability and match to the I Ching's grid of reality. What the ancients knew so long ago was how matter ebbed and flowed. Let's look at the star tetrahedron. The star tetrahedron you're going to see now is not a 64. It's a 4-face tetrahedron. But you'll be able to see how it replicates itself. You see that? So you've got the big one, then you got the second one, and you got the third one, and then you got the fourth one. That's the 4-face star tetrahedron. But isn't this amazing to you that the basis of all existence that came to us from the UFO commanders is what we call the Star of David? Huh? Gee. You say, that's the Star of David. Yes, it is. But the amazing thing is the Star of David is the Tetrahedron. And the Tetrahedron is what is in space where there is nothing and becomes the creative replicating power of what we call God. It exists where nothing else exists. It's in what is called the vacuum. It is a geometric pattern life structure, as DNA is a geometric pattern life structure. What purpose can it have in creating its own change other than what we've seen? I want to show you something from something called intentionsdesign.com. Look what it says. Intentions Design. Years ago, I noticed a resemblance between individual thoracic vertebrae and the stellated tetrahedrons. See? In the vertebrae, the angle between the spinous process and the anterior inferior vertebral body form two arms of a tetrahedron. Not interesting. This site is very large, and there's tons of pictures about body parts in there connecting them to tetrahedrons, and you can go on and look at it yourself. Intentionsdesign.com. This is how Nasim Haramein explains the importance of the tetrahedron to your body. Now, this is really good. So let's take our time and go over it. This comes from heartmind.us. It's Nasim Haramein's latest presentation. He says that the vacuum directs reality. Do you get that? Where there is nothing but space, we say nothing's there. But the tetrahedron is there. And the tetrahedron is going to direct the reality of what goes on here in the 3 dimension. Water has a tetrahedral geometry. You know what that means? That means when you take a drink of water, you're drinking the Star of David. It doesn't make any difference whether you think you are or not. You are. How important then is that star? The biogenic, now the word biogenic means life processes. The biogenic life processes, biogenic, which means life process, strength of the living water in our body. Now listen to me. This is how important this is. The living water in your body in association with the geometry of the minerals will determine the perfection of your DNA. In other words, the Star of David geometric pattern in the water will interact with the geometry pattern of the minerals and determine the perfection in our DNA. Do you see how then DNA can be changed? All you have to do is change the pattern. Okay? So you say, well, it goes here and it goes there. Okay, so we'll change it here and we'll go over there. You change the geometric pattern and you change life itself. But the tetrahedron does it. Protein and mucopolysaccharide structures. Okay, let's read it again. the life process strength of living water in our body, because it's Star of David, in association with the geometry of the minerals in our body, will determine the perfection of DNA, protein, and mucopolysaccharide structures. That word means the components of connective tissue. So, the water, Star of David, interacting with the geometric patterns of mineral will then set up the structure, even the components of the connective tissue. And then Nasim says, it is not surprising that the biophotons, where have we heard that word before? The biophotons. And biophotons mean light produced by cell activity. You remember when I showed you the pictures from Japan of the photons radiating out? Okay? The photons in your body create light. You are like a lightning bug. You light up. You may not see it, but you do. And if they stand you in front of one of those cameras for 10 minutes, they'll show you the pictures in different colors. That is what biophotons are. Light produced by cell activity, because you are an electrical appliance. It is not surprising that the light produced by cell activity in water show what? The geometry of the Star of David. 4 interpenetrating hexagonal planes. And of course, snowflakes exhibit fractal. That means repeating patterns. When somebody says it's fractal, because we may hear that word again, fractal means the pattern repeats itself. Just like you saw with the Star of David before, big one, down, 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 all the same. Snowflakes exhibit fractal repeating pattern, hexagonal vectors. That's the carrier that transmits. That's what the word vectors mean. Equilibrium means balance. Snowflakes. Snowflakes exhibit a pattern that repeats itself within the snowflake, from the large down to the small. It has a carrier in it that gives it balance. What this means is, not only when you're drinking water are you swallowing the Star of David, but in addition, when you have 6 inches of snow on your front lawn, you have 6 inches of Star of Davids all over the place. You're holier than hell. Or heaven. I don't know. Isn't that neat stuff, though? Did you follow? Tell me you did. Were you with me with this? What, was I able to make it understandable? Okay. That's important to me, because otherwise, you know, what we're seeing. So we have a better idea now, don't we, of the importance of the Star of David. We're beginning to see where Nasim Haramein is taking us, where he's coming from. So we again ponder his 64 tetrahedron, which he says is the structure of the invisible realm of everything. Well, there's that word fractal. You know, I wanted to go with it. A geometric pattern that is repeated at ever smaller scales to produce irregular shapes and surfaces that, you know, classical geometry cannot do. What's the next one here, John? I'm not sure. Yeah, there it is again. That's the 64-star tetrahedron. So the grid has to be, you have to consider this is the pattern of energy. So you may see that. I probably have seen that. You've probably seen that in a crop circle. Joe, we want to the next one. Well, there we have the star. This is a 64-star tetrahedron. You see the Star of David in here, the small? No matter how far out you go, do you see how it replicates itself? It may be this big, but it's an exact duplicate of that. So it never changes. It remains the same. As it says in the Bible, yesterday, today, and forever. It's the same because it duplicates itself fractally like that, staying the same. So you can find the star way out here or way in there. Interesting. So we have an idea of how this happens. Now, the next slide is the Nasim-Haramein logic, which has been accepted worldwide, that the invisible basis of all duplication in the universe is the tetrahedron. I'm not asking you to understand this. He does, so that's good enough for me. Okay, let's go. Because all radiation has a terminal speed, an inherent limit, because the minimum structural system is a tetrahedron, because the unit of energy is the tetrahedron, with vectors and all that, because the minimum energy package is 1 photon, because the minimum triangle in its tetrahedrons contraction is limited, blah, 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 blah. Physics discovered experimentally that the photon is the minimum radiation package, so we identify the minimum tetrahedron photon with a radius, which is the speed of light. The tetrahedron becomes the unit radius frequency limit, the speed of light. So you see the tetrahedron now is involved with the photon. And as we showed you initially, in the Bible, it said God is not a man, God is light, meaning God is a photon. Let me show you an email that was sent to me by somebody about this Nasim-Haramein video. John, he says, "Hi everyone, I just watched a video by physicist," Nasim is not a physicist, Nasim-Haramein, that talks about unlocking the truth to sacred geometry, fractals, the Mayan calendar in 2012, crop circles and all of that stuff. Jesus and free man, blah, blah, blah. Basically, Nasim believes everything boils down to a tetrahedron and the singularity. Personally, I never felt comfortable with religion until Nasim explained it. Now it all makes sense, and I find it absolutely fascinating. And I think you have two here, because basically that's what we've tried to do. So let's see where this tetrahedron information in the right hand drawn of Thoth. In www.arise.org. Now, I went fast again, so let me say, Haramein has discovered a whole new paradigm in physics, based not on finding a fundamental particle, but on finding the fundamental principle of the division of space. It's a theory based on the vacuum, that's where nothing is, being packed with an energy density, with matter being created in geometric fractals, just like we saw before, big and small, small and big, out of the space-time. The presentation of Haramein's theory takes the viewer back to ancient civilizations that seem to have had this knowledge of the physics of creation and embedded it in the world's religious texts. Isn't that exactly what we've been talking about over the past weeks? Of how it found its way into the Kabbalah, how it found its way into the Hindu Vedic Krishna, how it found its way into Greek philosophy, how it found its way into the Bible, how it found its way in the Kabbalah. It's there, and monuments to be handed down to a time when we had advanced enough to decode it. That time is now. And this is what's so exciting about it. You're on the verge of decoding the very essence of life and the secrets. We're understanding these things, decoding the very thing of what we call God. The Star of David in the Kabbalist tree of life of the Hebrew tradition, the flower of life, the Tao 64 grid of reality, the yin and yang sign, sacred geometry, the Egyptian eye, the Mayan glyphs, the pyramids, and other religious symbols around the world specifically describe the same geometry of creation. Everywhere you look, in ancient traditions, describing the God force. You'll find allusions to the geometry of space-time embedded as a code that could not be deciphered until we reach the level of understanding that we have today. And every bit of that, what he's talking about, came from the Emerald UFO fleet that landed in prehistoric Egypt. I mean, if the ancient civilizations, it had to come from somewhere. When we consider the Tetrahedron, I want you to sit back and, just hold on a minute. There's a strange, similar connection to the most ancient name of God. I want to go back to the most ancient Israelite or Hebrew form and what it's called, to the Jewish Encyclopedia. The Tetragrammaton is the ancient Israelite name for God. That comes from the Jewish Encyclopedia.com. What's God called? The Tetragrammaton. Come on. The cures, exorcisms of demons in the name of Jesus, which are mentioned in the New Testament and the Talmud, see exorcism, imply that Jesus was regarded as a god and that his name was considered as powerfully effective as the Tetragrammaton. Why not? He was the guy that commanded the ship that landed 26,000 years ago. This is the Jewish saying this, for which it was even substituted. It was in connection with magic that the Tetragrammaton was introduced into the magic papyrus and in all probability into the writings of the church fathers. Do you realize what you're hearing that nobody else knows? The church connected the name Jesus to the Tetragrammaton. Isn't that interesting? Oh, John. Jewish Encyclopedia, the mystic name Tetragrammaton was well known to the Gnostics. Jesus gave them that. Remember the sign right here? As is shown by the fact that the third of the 8 eons of one of their systems of creation was called the unpronounced, the fourth the invisible, and the seventh the unnamed, terms which are designations of the Tetragrammaton. With the Tetragrammaton must be included the names of God formed of 12, 42, and 72 letters respectively, which are important factors in Jewish mysticism. Remember I told you the 64 Tetrahedron has 144 faces, and where they talk about the 72 72 letters. Remember, the 72 letters take 2 polarities, male and female, and when you take the male 72, as Nasim says, and connect it to the female 72, you've got 144, and as it says in the book of Revelation, 144 faces around the magic city and all of that stuff. They have, according to tradition, a magical effect, for mysticism and magic are everywhere allied. When we think back about the 12, 42, and 72 letters, and we think back to the words of the Emerald Tablet in our earlier sessions, we compare the words of the Emerald Commander with what it says in the... Hold it, Joan. You know what it says here? Important factors in Jewish mysticism, a magical effect. This is from the Jewish Encyclopedia, a magical effect. Look at here. Then, this comes from the Emerald Tablet. Then spoke I to them in words calm and peaceful, telling them of the might of Atlantis, saying, we were children of the sun and its messengers, and cowed I them by my display of magic, science. And the Jewish Encyclopedia talks about the Tetragrammaton and a magical effect, and in the hand of Thoth we saw the Tetrahedron. So here we have the evidence of the one with the Tetrahedron, the Tetragrammaton, attached to magic. And you know what magic was 30,000 years ago? Advanced technology. Huh? That's what it is. Your cell phone is magic. Your television is magic. Joe? These great names, Jewish Encyclopedia, are closely akin to the long series of vowels in the magic papyrus and are obtained by anagrammatic combinations of the effective elements of the Tetragrammaton. The simplest way of determining these three names is to form a magic triangle whose base is a single Tetragrammaton. In other words, a pyramid that Thoth, the UFO commander, made. And its apex, the Tetragrammaton, repeated 3 times. The 4 upper lines give the names with 42 letters, and the entire figure represents the divine name of 72 letters. And you'll find many religious people who will tell you that the way they wrote the Bible is they got 72 guys into one room and they all sat down and rewrite it. So let's go back to the Emerald Tablet again. I built the Great Pyramid, patterned after the Pyramid of Earth Force, burning eternally, so that it too might remain through the ages. I built my knowledge of magic science so that I might be here when again I return from Amenti. While I sleep in the halls of Amenti, my soul roaming free will incarnate and dwell among men in this form of another. And then again, the Jewish Encyclopedia talks about the magic triangle or the magic pyramid. We're getting closer and closer to understanding the nature and importance of the Tetrahedron from the UFO commander. Now, let's look at horizon. The Jewish word for God is Tetragrammaton, referring to 4 sides of a tetrahedron and perhaps gravitation. The flower of life is a representative of a waveform when the 64 tetrahedron grid is seen in 3 dimensions. The yin and yang sign is a representation of the spinning double torus as seen from the top. The I Ching is based on a 64 grid of reality. The Star of David is the geometric shape used to construct the 64 tetrahedral grid. We are all connected. Can you stay another few minutes? I'm almost done. The importance of 4, that's important. The number 4 is what the Jewish tradition brought out of the Tetragrammaton, and they come up that the 4, because tetra means 4. Okay? So what they come up with is the 4 letters, and their letters came to what we would say YHWH, which other people have called Yahweh. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the actual Jewish Tetragrammaton and its value. Here it is. This is it. Now, they come up with YHWH. It means existence, life, copulation, life, expresses in the existence the 2 lives, the container or the shell or the physical support, and that of the contained or the inner life. You can think of a pregnant woman, the container and the contained, that fertilize each other. This double impregnation can only occur in man, and as long as it does not occur, YHWH is eminent but unborn. This equation is an assertion of 4 on all levels. We know that this powerful mobilization of 4 is the indispensable counterpart to the highest kind of life that this planet can produce. These are the Hebrew letters of the Tetrahedron. Here you get 10 for there. The way they do this, then they take the second letter, they take the 10, add this letter, which is 5, you get 15. Now they add the third letter, you add the 10, the 5, and the 6, you get 21. Then you come down here with this, and you get the 10, the 5, the 6, and 26. Well, when you add them all together, the full gematria, the total gematria is 72. Okay? And basically, what Nasim Haramein says, that's fine. That's the polarity of the male. But you have to add to it the polarity of the female. let's go back to Nasim for just a minute. Known as the Merkaba, the configuration of the star formed within the first 8 cells. The star also models the body of the human being, heaven and earth, male and female. The tetrahedron, blah, blah. But this is the point. And what you look at when you saw the Tetragrammaton is there. So I want you to real quickly take you to an educational site referencing tetrahedron, considering that the name tetrahedron invokes the 4 words as a religious angle. We'll see how the number 4 figures into the tetrahedron as Nasim comes up with it. The number of tetrahedron, this is from www.publicasu.edu. The number of tetrahedra in any given stage increases by multiples of 4. Stage 1 is 1 times 4. Stage 2 has 4 times 4, which is 16. Stage 3 has 4 times 16, which is 64. The number of tetrahedra at any given stage is always the number of tetrahedra in the previous group. This is growth in the powers of 4. So, Tetragrammaton is God or Jesus was not in 4 words, YHWH, but in the powers of 4, it allows the duplicate growth from the smallest to the largest. So the nature of God becomes the nature of copulation, physically, and what we would call spiritually, as photon copulates with the brain, and as energy within the tetrahedron copulates to duplicate itself. The 64 is outlined by Harameen, we understand, to be an invisible energy with ever larger duplication. Harameen takes the tetrahedron, and in particular Tetragrammaton, and takes us to the Bible for a significant proposal. And this is where we will pretty much wind up. That this here, the 72 number fulfills only the male, but requires an additional 72 to fulfill the complete creation, Gematria, which brings the number to 144. On the 64 matrix, there are 144 faces, parts visible. In Revelation 7, I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000. Okay? Now, I just want here, next to be the final slide, and we'll conclude with this, as I watched Nasim Haramein's presentation, I made these notes, and I would just share them with you as we close this. Tetragrammaton number 72 is half total polarity. It is a male polarity, 72. You add the female polarity, equals 144. The total number of forms or faces on the 64 tetrahedron is 144. So you see, you're connecting something which is a life-creating force inside of everything, and connecting it to the Tetragrammaton. And then with 144 in Revelation 7:4, I heard the number of them which were sealed, and they were sealed 144,000. In Revelation 14:1, and I looked, and a lamb stood out of Mount Zion, and with him 144,000.